It is a freezing morning in Turin, Italy, in January 1889. In a public square, a cart driver stands over his exhausted horse. When the beast refuses to move, the driver loses his temper and viciously whips the animal. Suddenly, a man bursts through the gathered crowd. Weeping uncontrollably, he throws his arms around the bleeding animal's neck. He whispers an apology into the horse's ear, and then collapses onto the cobblestones. That man was Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher famous for declaring that pity is a disease, and that kindness is merely a mask worn by the weak. How does a mind that spent a lifetime demanding absolute, unflinching strength completely shatter at the sight of everyday suffering? Look at this progression. Nietzsche believed human psychology evolves through three distinct stages, starting here: the camel. The camel kneels in the sand and asks to be loaded with heavy burdens, carrying the weight of tradition, religion, and obedience without complaint. Nietzsche started his own life carrying massive weight. Born in 1844 in a quiet Prussian village, he was raised in a strict Gothic parsonage. He was so intensely pious that local children actually called him the little pastor. When he was 4 years old, his father, a devoted minister, succumbed to a slow, agonizing brain disease. The young boy spent hours sitting outside a closed door, listening to the man he idolized scream in agony. The young boy wondered why a just, loving God would inflict such brutal torture on his most loyal servant. The bedrock of his faith began to crack. Still, he kept carrying the burdens expected of him. He threw himself into academia, securing a university professorship at the exceptionally young age of 24. He even found a surrogate father to revere, the towering German composer Richard Wagner. By 18, he was already writing essays arguing that the central stories of the church were myths rather than history. The camel was finally staggering under the weight of a tradition he could no longer reconcile with his own research. When the camel can no longer bear the weight, it walks out into the desert and transforms into the second stage, the lion. The lion's only purpose is destruction. It roars no to the rules it used to obey. For Nietzsche, that roar began during the Franco-Prussian War. He volunteered as a medical orderly, driven by romantic ideas of German nationalism. Instead of glory, he spent days locked in train cars filled with the rotting, screaming bodies of wounded soldiers. The filth of the war broke his body. He contracted dysentery and diphtheria. These illnesses triggered blinding, paralyzing migraines that left him vomiting in darkened rooms for weeks at a time. As his body failed, his patience for his idols evaporated. He watched Richard Wagner embrace aggressive German nationalism and toxic anti-Semitism. Disgusted by the bigotry, Nietzsche severed the relationship completely. Stripped of his health, his mentors, and his patriotism, he had nothing left to lean on. The lion had torn down the protective walls, leaving him to face a chaotic, irrational universe alone. He tried to find intellectual and romantic connection with a brilliant young writer named Lou Salome. She firmly rejected his marriage proposal, leaving him profoundly isolated. He retreated to the freezing, high-altitude peaks of Sils Maria in the Swiss Alps. Nearly blind and plagued by chronic pain, his intense isolation fueled a ferocious output of dangerous ideas. He dissected human values, arguing that concepts like pity and humility were part of a slave morality. He viewed this as a psychological trick invented by the weak and powerless to constrain the strong and successful. Then he delivered his final blow. God is dead, and we have killed him. People often misread this today as a triumphant atheist cheer. It was a terrifying warning. He saw that without a divine anchor for objective truth or morality, humanity was staring into a black void of meaninglessness. The lion had successfully demolished the house, leaving mankind homeless. The lion is a destroyer, but it cannot create. To survive the void, the human spirit must undergo its final metamorphosis, becoming the child. A child plays, forgets the past, and creates entirely new rules for the game of life. During his darkest, most suicidal winter, Nietzsche wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra, introducing his solution to nihilism, the Übermensch, or Superman. The Superman is not a military conqueror. He is an individual who conquers his own fears, using his deepest pain as the raw material to sculpt a superior soul. Nietzsche proposed a thought experiment called the eternal recurrence. Imagine a demon tells you that you must live your exact life, every heartbreak, every illness, every joy, in the exact same sequence, over and over again for all eternity. Would you fall to the ground in despair? Or would you embrace it, crying out, Amor fati, I love my fate? Real strength means finding such profound meaning in your existence that you would gladly welcome your own pain forever. Nietzsche never saw his ideas take root. After his mental collapse hugging the horse in Turin, he spent 11 years in a silent haze. Meanwhile, his passionately anti-Semitic sister Elizabeth seized control of his unpublished notes. She maliciously edited his words, weaponizing the concept of the Übermensch into a biological superiority complex to serve the rising Nazi party. A philosophy built on mastering oneself was warped to justify slaughtering millions. While his sister was forging a nationalist icon, Nietzsche himself had written that he was an anti-German who despised the herd mind of the state. He saw a greater threat in what he called the last man, the modern individual who seeks only comfort, avoids all risk, and lives like a blinking machine waiting to die. In a world without a divine safety net, the tightrope is still tensed over the abyss. To keep from falling, you must become your own savior.